Good morning. We are closing up our week 3 of Sesshin and our winter practice period. It's been a most excellent week with everyone. Been most excellent 3 weeks with everyone that has been here for that entire time. And it's most excellent to be with you all this morning. This morning we have our Shuso. He's going to offer a talk, Reverend Jushin Stephyn Butcher. He started his Buddhist journey in 1997, practicing in the Tibetan tradition under His Holiness Penor Rinpoche. I hope I said that correctly. Several dharma names later, he found his way to Hokyoji, where he became a student of Dokai Georgesen. Jushin, or Abiding Trust, received jukai from Dokai in 2013 and ordination in 2017. He works as a software engineer by day, teaches artificial intelligence at Johns Hopkins University by night, and resides in Cambridge, Maryland with his husband, dog, chickens, and gardens. So without much further ado, here is our Shuso-san, Reverend Jushin Stephyn Butcher.
Good morning, everyone.
All right, now can you hear me? Okay.
Yeah.
All right, yeah. You can leave the gallery up for...
You want to do that?
Yeah, please. Oh, well, do what you have to do to record the screen properly.
Okay, yeah, we might...
Yeah.
The gallery be tiny while you talk.
Yeah, it was just nice to see everybody, but I know for speaker view we have to record it this way. All right, so good. Now that's weird because I'm looking at myself and I'm not looking at myself. Okay, so good morning. Right, it's like, there's the bird and it's right there. So good morning, everyone. It's wonderful to be here and to be concluding our winter practice period and our week-long sesshin here at the end. And the Shuso ceremony was fun last night. I think Dokai's last advice last night was not to scrunch up your face if you make a mistake. And I might have scrunched up my face a few times with the zagu, but other than that, I tried not to. I think maybe only he saw, because I was facing him when I scrunched. I was like, "Grr." So we have been taking up during the winter practice period a sutra, the Bahra Sutra, the burden. And I'm going to try and sum up some of the things that we've gone over. So it might sound a little bit of repetitive people who are here, but maybe not to people in the Zoom-do. But the sutra sort of sits purposely in the way that Wallace has structured his book at the middle, at the crossroads, and it's sort of a different telling. This is Bhikkhu Bodhi says, this is just the Four Noble Truths over again, and just a different way. And I think it's interesting because when we think about whether semi-mythical or not, the first Buddhist council, when they said, let's try and remember all the things he said, I don't know how careful they were to say was like, yeah, he said that 5 years ago, but this he said 3 years ago. And it's like, what I know myself as an educator, I don't teach things the same way I did 20 years ago, 15 years ago, even 10 years ago. In fact, they actually make me redo my classes every 5 years. So it's kind of, was this a later version of the Four Noble Truths, or was it an early one? Was it just sometimes you have to explain things differently to people. If it is possible to get him big on my screen, that's she needs to turn it to
Speaker.
Yeah, she has it on gallery and she needs to turn it to speaker. I've got really good at this over the last 3 years. So we don't know, it's like, but this is so sometimes you have to explain things different ways to different people, just a different way of getting at the same time, at the same thing. So I don't know whether, did this supersede this? Was this the original version? Or was just, I'm telling it to the capacity of the person who's in front of me who remembered it, and they went and did it. So I think it's nice, useful in thinking about the burden to compare it to the Four Noble Truths and to see if we can sort of get at the heart of it. The burden starts out, so we have been reading this every day, but they haven't. So I'm going to go over it a little bit. Oh, wait, that's the commentary I need to find. My book just naturally opens up to this now. I will teach you about the burden. I will teach you about the bearer of the burden, the taking up of the burden, the putting down of the burden. Listen to what I say. So the burden he describes essentially as the grasping five aggregates. And it's sort of interesting in the Pali, this is going to be Pancha Upadana Kanda. And so it's all one word. So, and they do this in Sanskrit too. So we have the word bookkeeper. So it's made of book and keeper, and you make these. Actually, I didn't do that, but it didn't change anything. If you, they're much more common. They're called sandhi, and they just agglomerate, and the vowels change, and it's horrible. But if you sort of think about the word bookkeeper, it's composed of book and keeper. What do you think bookkeepers do?
Keep books.
I know, but which books? Like, I would think that bookkeeper would be a librarian, not an accountant. But it is not, is it? So there's a little bit of ambiguity there. And then there's a little bit of ambiguity is like, is it grasping aggregates or grasping aggregates? And in the actual sutra called the aggregates, the Buddha does distinguish. So he talks about there are the aggregates and there are the grasping aggregates, and they're grasping, and we talked about this. The literal word is effluence. So it's sort of just the spewing forth. In the Bhikkhu Sutra, he actually talks about, it's a little ambiguous, but it talks about sort of the aggregates are that by which you're measured, that which you have tendencies for, that which you're obsessed with. And then if you lose that obsession, that tendency, that grasping, you no longer have the aggregates. So I think that the idea of what the aggregates may or may not be is just a little bit fuzzy there. When you talk about, and he talks about the world a lot, but if you look at the Rohatissa Sutra, this is the famous one where Rohatissa is the god, and he says, I'm trying to reach the end of the world. And the Buddha says, essentially, you can't reach the end of the world because no matter where you are, no matter where you're at, there you are. Right? This fathom-long, we can only find the end of the world in this fathom-long carcass. So, well, some of us a little shorter than a fathom, but some of us a little taller than a fathom. But it speaks to that most of these categories, I think, in terms of mappings, we talked about mappings, map is not the territory. Actually, Tim Masajek, who's on, actually gave a Dharma talk about maps and map of the and not being the territory, is I think more of possibly the aggregates being not form, but our experience of form.
Could you say what the aggregate?
Oh yes, from the Heart Sutra, form, perception, feeling, formation, and consciousness.
Also called skandha.
Also called skandhas in Sanskrit, but in Pali they're khandas. So I heard you that one day on Zoom, but I couldn't unmute. So I think the Buddha is very, very interested in the human condition. And our human condition, he didn't know it, is, I talked about this as like we're the result of evolution who had different goals. Essentially, if you have had offspring, helped offspring, indirectly made the species go to the next generation, that's all evolution wanted out of you. You know, I always like to do this somewhat teleologically, but millions of years ago, some cells got together and said, you know, we could do this a lot better if we teamed up. And here we are. And it's this configuration is optimized, maybe not even optimized, satisficed is the word that Herbert Simon used, is satisficed for survival and reproducing. That's kind of what that cell's thing. Not geared for happiness. So wherever it got interesting along the way and we became self-aware, and we still don't know why or how, the reasons, we started sort of hijacking that. And that's not uncommon. Evolution never gets to build from scratch. So, for example, your amygdala, where most of your emotion, fight or flight, I mentioned it was directly tied to your taste buds. Well, when people have moral jumps and go, that makes me sick, it actually does make them sick. Evolution hijacked the amygdala for those feelings. It doesn't mean you can't change them. It just means those things are just very closely wired together. So everything's always being repurposed. And so for whatever reason, we repurposed things so we can make symbols and language and jet airplanes and nuclear bombs and all the rest. But not necessarily happiness. So I think the Buddha was looking at the human condition, and Stephen Batchelor points out, and I just never really thought of it before, how absolutely radical the Buddha's approach was to what was going on in terms of, there's the idea of being Atman, being separate from God. We're sort of in this sort of defiled, messy existence, and we're just like, we want to get away from it. And we're going to do this by meditating, and we're going to try and shut down everything and get into these really, 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 really happy states. And then eventually we merge with God and we leave all the crummy stuff behind. And, he says, well, partly he says, we don't know that any of that is true. In the Kalama Sutra, he says, my teaching is good whether there's an afterlife, there's no afterlife, or there's many lives. But he starts telling people to be mindful of going to the bathroom. Be mindful. It's like just concentrate on these things, on the body, and everyone's like, "Ooh, body, yuck." So he brings it really down to earth, literally. And I think this is developed. I'm not going to go into this, but I think this is even developed more in the Zen tradition, in some ways, because this is one of the things, and I can't remember the author. I think it's a French name, The Ways of Thinking of Eastern Peoples. He talks about India, and they're really big on they're like us. They're like really big, complicated mythology systems. It's like, and this is that, and this, and you have the Vedas, and you have all this. And the Chinese, they don't have any of this. And so when they hear about it, and they learned about it, they're like, wow, we didn't even think about any of this stuff. And another thing that happens, though, is that a lot of this is metaphor or epistemology. And when it moves to China, it becomes, they take it as literal truth. And it sort of fits in with Tao and Taoism, and that's, again, a whole other thing. So the Buddha's being very concrete, and, that goes up and down over the years. But I think the model of thinking in terms of the skanda is the stream, and we can think of this also, and Wallace talks about for the dependent origination, that we don't have to take that as literally. And you can, I mean, like, I feel this in my own life, like you get mad at something and it's like you become another person. Like you're just, things come, we talk about mind stream and karma, and people, when you're talking about real reincarnation, you have to think about ways where these memories are stored, the alaya, where karma is stored. But if you think it's just your experience, you have a really potent emotional experience or intentional experience, and it gets tagged and it gets saved, and then something triggers it, and it comes right back up again. So we're just rehashing it. That's samsara, over and over and over and over. And the other thing, though, is I think over the years we've become a little sloppy with the word karma. So originally karma really just meant intention in terms of what the Brahmas did when they did their offerings. And then the Buddha sort of broadened it to be like, it's your intentional actions. There's actually a sutra where Ananda, poor Ananda, he goes up to the Buddha and says, oh, this is easy. If this and that and that, and the Buddha's got like, no, Ananda, don't say that. Karma is really difficult to suss out. It could be because of phlegm or bile, so that was their model. But now we would say, I went off the rails one day, and later Kyoku goes, he must have really low blood sugar that day. And I'm like, yeah, I mean, that's a thing. Not all of it is karma. Not almost like, you can have, maybe you had a little deficit of dopamine or serotonin that day. It's like, with these electromolecular machines, and that's part of the point, and the Buddha didn't know it, is we have this perception of being agents in the world, that are controlling things. I always call it a ghost in a meat suit. And that's the burden we have to just put down. Oh, and this is my attempt at just put down in calligraphy. So yeah, that's the hard part. I think it's a little, and Rusha and I think use this a lot because it seems like an easier way to come at it, and we share this then with in Buddhism with the Stoics, is it's just not all under our control. In fact, not a whole lot of it is under our control. And if you just think about things and you're going like, well, how is sesshin going to be? And sesshin is never going to be what you imagine it's going to be. A dharma talk is never, I don't even know the words I'm going to say in 5 minutes. So a dharma talk is not what you expect it's going to be. The plan right here is not what you expect it's going to be. Your life is not, your career, even just brushing your teeth sometimes is not what you expect it's going to be. And we have this craving for things to turn out the way we want. And we get really upset when they don't. And there are some small things in that. We want a birthday party to turn out well. And there are some big things in that. We would probably prefer not to have aging, old age, and sickness. So, there's different degrees. I think this is where it's a little helpful to go back to the Four Noble Truths for contrast, because we can talk about, the Buddha says, kind of the obvious thing. So my husband really rags on me a lot, because, you Buddhists are always talking about suffering or death. Can you identify that with it? Why are you talking about suffering all the time? It was like, are you going to talk about death again? And it's like, wow, okay. And to be fair, the Stoics did it too. The Stoics did it. It was not just us. But it's to bring into relief, sort of what's important. And, it focuses you a little bit. But there's the other part, where it's just like stuff you can just easily identify with. Because remember, when the Buddha says, he has his enlightenment, and he goes, God, this is subtle. I don't think I'm going to be able to explain this to people. My favorite word. It will be vexatious to me to try and explain this to other people. And then one of the Indras comes down and he goes like, no, there's some people who get it. And he goes, oh, okay. So he goes and he tries to explain it. Well, my favorite one is he tries to explain it to some random guy on the street, and he goes, I have become the dharma king, I understand the Tathagata, and the guy goes like this. So apparently in India at the time, this was that. So he's going like, this guy is crazy. So he finds the 5 ascetics. And I think, and it's good. So we have this weird relationship now with history. I think at the Buddha's time, what we notice, and when the Buddha says this is a really simple version of cause and effect. This happens, that happens. Because of this, because of that. We go, oh yeah, we're all connected. Kumbaya. And that's not, I think, what the Buddha is saying at all. Because I think with the people living closer to the land, they very much well knew cause and effect. I think with us, we don't know that kind of social relationship. Marx wrote a whole 3-volume set on it. You can go read it at your leisure. It was the agent. It's the subtle that, no, your interior life, your experience is subject to the same kinds of things that planting the rainy season and all of that. You're part of it. So the Buddha says in the Four Noble Truths, when he's talking about the part suffering, so he's talking about not getting what you want is suffering. So that's something more we can. And the actual word dukkha is really hard. Bhikkhu Bodhi is now doing stressful. It's kind of close. It's just a lack. I picture it as, so people familiar with The Wizard of Oz?
Oh, no, I've never heard of it.
Well, do you notice that Echo? Do you notice it starts out in black and white?
Yes.
Yes.
And then when they get to Oz, it turns to color.
Yes.
That is the lack. I think we have this sense of a world being in black and white that should be in color. That's dukkha. It is literally the hole in the wheel that the spoke goes into. But it has some kind of different.
Like a crooked wheel.
No, it's the hole.
Oh.
It's the lack. It's an empty, not that kind of emptiness. It's or void. Can't use any of those words. They've been ruined. But dukkha is what it is. So, but also getting what you want. Like sometimes I have to get it right. We snatch defeat from the jaws of victory. Like, something good is happening, but it wasn't quite up to our expectations. So there's just this tone, I think, to the world. They joke about it a little bit in everywhere, everything, everywhere, all at once. It has a completely different cause. It has to do with the multiverses colliding. But there is everything's just not quite right. Your dinner doesn't quite taste right. This doesn't quite do it. So everything is kind of imbued with that. I have 1 minute. So the antidote, and there's a number of antidotes sprinkled throughout, like boundless friendliness. Like you can just lose that self that doesn't exist anywhere, and losing yourself in service, losing yourself in devotion in our particular case, losing that self, just in zazen. And as I talked about before, it's because of that goal, if you want, of filling that lack, that craving is there for everything, that zazen has no goal, or it would then just fall under that. It would become another almost competition. and you want ever better experiences. So we sit zazen. So Akio, during the Shuso ceremony, asked me a question. And what I want to do is I want to back into it the other way. So every time we practice, we're putting down the burden. Hopefully, we try not to take it back up again. And this actually relates to Dokai. I'm thankful for the toothache I don't have. I'm going to put it a slightly different way. I'm thankful for all the suffering I haven't endured because of my practice. I'm thankful for all of the joy I didn't rob because of the practice. So, because it's a non-observable, I think we overly discount how much the practice has helped us, because we still feel that there's some lack or some unquench. And sometimes I think we just need to reflect, and there's a really long way to get to the punchline. Here at the end of a practice period, at the end of a session, reflect on the suffering we haven't had. I now leave it
Dragons and elephants.
to the dragons and elephants.
Ask about the Zundo thing.
Hi, Zundo. Oh, Zundo. You have any questions?
Comments?
Criticisms? If there's any reason you cannot leave a 5-star rating, please let me know now and see if I can improve my Dharma talk. Yes, Tim.
There's just a phrase in your talk that you used that made me think of something else when we were talking about the little things of sufferings that wanting a birthday to go well. And it made me think of, I don't think I've ever wanted my own birthday party to go well, but one often thinks of a small child wanting their birthday party to go well. So there's, a lot of times when we talk about desire and clinging, it's phrased in what we want for ourselves, because that's like obvious examples, but it can also be what we want for someone else, and it feels more benign or friendly, and I suppose it is, but it's also still clinging. Or do you have anything to talk about wanting a 7-year-old's birthday party to go well?
I have one word for you: bridezilla. So no, that's not, because that's your own wedding. But you can, yes, so you can make everyone around you miserable. Dang it, we're going to be a happy family. It's like, I don't know why, just a family vacation comes to mind. We are going to have fun. And it's like until morale improves, the beatings will continue. So yeah, you have to watch. There's planning, and there's like, I want this to go well, and they have a clown. I guess I know. Well, no. Because there's a next line, and the clown shows up inebriated, and you have to okay, how am I going to just deal with this? Rather than stressing, adding the head on top of your head, adding the second arrow, right? So next month I will talk about something else. I still don't know why, but yeah, that's my thought on that. Yes, Eka?
So my granddaughter had her 6th birthday party last August, and she had a friend birthday party, and we weren't there, but we saw her wishes on her for her birthday, blowing out the candles. And she was having a wonderful birthday and the most fun ever. And her wish was, I hope my next year's birthday party is as good as this one now. So it's kind of clinging to the good and wanting that to be reproduced. So it's just,
Grushin has.
So Alex had a really good point the other day, saying you have to know the burden to be able to put the burden down. And I am remembering a priest, nobody in this room, when Sandy had died, gave me this little photocopy of something from Norman Fisher. And Norman Fisher in this little thing said he wanted to suffer more, because the more he suffered, the better person he was. Well, this is the last thing I wanted to hear at that time, because I couldn't imagine suffering much more than I was already suffering. So it was kind of inappropriate to be giving me that. But I think he does have a point that it helps you recognize something. And I always, with like a wedding, I always think, well, if the weather is really bad and they were planning an outdoor wedding, they'll always remember that wedding. Whereas, you know, if everything goes perfect, it just flies by. And so I always say, Dokai does his best every retreat to make it memorable. And he really went out of his way.
I don't know what that means.
We don't know how you're going to top it.
We don't know what.
How you're going to top it.
We don't want to know.
We don't want to know.
We don't want to know.
I don't know, kidney stones, COVID.
Yeah, it was a treat.
It's just, I'll remember this retreat.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I think there's a point to appreciating the suffering as well as appreciating the not suffering, right? So.
Yeah. Although, yeah.
Kind of follow up on that, because I heard it in what you were saying of the grasping aggregates.
Mhm.
Maybe those are when the big global suffering, they're kind of shining bright in there, right? But I just, maybe you could go over that just a little more, because I was getting the sense that there's aggregates out there like clover. I see clover, I don't care, I don't have much of a feeling about it there, it's there. But then if I see sticker things, you know, those weeds that stick you and then you get the thorn.
Yeah.
Like, I have a big reaction when I see them. So is that what you're sort of saying? Like, there's the forms that are very triggering, I guess, in our modern language.
Yeah. I mean, that's it. I think that is. We're triggered by things for whatever reason. You know, sometimes it's previous experience, sometimes it's low blood sugar. But no, I think that's it exactly.
It's almost like they jump
But
out.
it's you, but it's us.
Yeah.
It's all part of, you know, our existential situation. And I think that I think it's interesting as you get to the Mahayana and you talk about there being a glass of water and not being a glass of water. But I'm not sure that's actually where the Buddha started. Because he was mostly just concerned, like, there's no I, me, mine. One section, the Maha, what is it, Vacha Sutta starts out, and it's like, the section is called, It's Not Yours. Just like that. It's going to be, it's not yours. It's not yours. There's no luggage racks on hearses, which is like, of course, Michael was like, yeah, you're talking about death again. But it's like, it's not yours. Yeah. But we have to, one of the things I think that, and I'm going to say this, and then I honestly am not sure I could do it anymore. You know, Dogen kind of, I mean, he talks about entangling vines against, entwining vines against twining vines, like using words against words, which is great. But he also says things like, okay, language can't get you to where you need to go in Zazen. And it's like, well, I don't know. The Tibetans kind of did in some area. Like there are mental exercises. And one of the things I think the Tibetans do a little bit better than we do maybe in the Zen tradition is really honing in on what the I you're negating is. Because it's very easy to slip off into the person, which is what's really nice about the burden, is because like there's a person, like, and Wallace is even cute about it. He says, you know what I'm talking about. Don't get all Zen on me. He doesn't have to, don't get all Zen on me there. But there's a person, you know what you're talking about from with such and such a name and such a family. And I think if you're not just really sure about what's being negated, then I think you can get a little bit into trouble. Which is why sometimes I think it's a little bit easier to think about the control aspect of it. It's like I'm not in control of everything. And some of it is, this is all very slippery because you have to plan. You plan for the future. You 401k. But it's not guaranteed that, the currency will be stable when we get there. And so, you have to do stuff. And this used to be a really thing that troubled me a lot. Because when you hear things, it's like the moment, just in the moment, not the future, not the past. And I go, then why do the monks plant rice? Like, why are they doing all of this stuff? And I always think of the distinction is it's not living for the moment, it's living in the moment. It's like just being in the moment. And if in the moment is planning, then do that. But, we don't, it's hard. Rumination, why does he always do that? Why do I always do that? But again, I'm trying to leave on a high note. Imagine all the times we're not doing that now. Because of practice. Anything else in the Zoom though? I'm going to take silence as consent. Anything else in the regular Zendo?
Well, one thing that occurred to me when you talked about Bhikkhu Bodhi, Bhikkhu Bodhi, using the word stressful. When I first got not my first job out of college, but my second job, I worked with folks at Cargill who were in the livestock division. And my client was Fred Saltbold, who was brought up on a farm, and a livestock farm on North Dakota. And he said that all livestock's life, no matter how you manage it, is stressful. And it is for humans too. Yeah. But sort of fundamentally, you have to, you can be in the open field, foraging, completely in wild, that's stressful. Or you can have humans pen you, that's stressful. They'll feed you, that's stressful. There's better stress and worse stress, but life is really stressful. And the reason Fred talked about this is because his job was to reduce stress. It wasn't just the feed, it was like, what can we do besides feeding the animals that will make them less stressed? Because if they're less stressed, they gain more weight. And he said, he was really a wonderful man and very engaged with livestock. And I think found life wonderful, but sad, because they raised animals and he spent a lot of time trying to make it not stressful, and then went on in his adult life doing that. And so I've always thought that that's the baseline the Buddha's talking about. And so we're always saying, how can I make it less stressful? I want this, I don't want that. And in a way, that's the head, the second head, because, and it doesn't mean you don't have moments of joy during a stressful life, they just show up. And you have really bad times during a stressful life that are so stressful you think I can't go on. But I think what he's dealing with is our agency. What are we choosing, or how do we choose to have less stress? And that was absolutely radical, which was become aware of the grasping and then try to somehow reduce that, and that would really release the stress. Not wanting to go to the next field in the moment if you didn't have to go to the next field in the moment, right? So I don't know. I like the word stressful is what I'm getting back to. I like it when I heard that usage of it's like, yeah, life is simply stressful. You can say it isn't because there's moments where it isn't, but on whole, it's stressful.
Well, I mean, you look at our evolutionary past, it was all the time you have to be on or the lion gets you on the Serengeti.
Right. Yeah.
So, I mean, it's only recently, and I had an economics professor. I mean, there's the added stress of, as I mentioned this in a talk before, Dwayne, but we were only evolved to be in like really small groups. Like we were not meant to be around a million people constantly. Like it's like basically at a subconscious level, we just have constant stranger danger because we don't know who that person is and we don't know what their status is in relation to us. It is. Yeah. Do you have?
What's that?
Do you have?
Well,
You can add something?
I have a very, probably off track.
No, but you need a mic.
Oh,
So,
The worst can happen, I'll say, I don't know the answer.
well, no, it's not about that.
It's
It should be on. You just have to point it the right way.
Yeah, I mean, okay, so I'm sitting here
Gotta hold it up.
hearing about the virtues of practice, and and that's all referential to everybody's head here, right? I mean, so what about relating in the world where there's not necessarily practice involved, and what is the value of that? I mean, it seems like to me the end of our basic purpose can't just be about eliminating our own suffering, right? I mean,
Oh, yeah, for sure. So my talk next month will probably address this more directly. So I'll just prelude. So I think of it, so we have, so these are just categories, right? Maps for thinking about things. So if we think about the two arrows, and this is more in relation to Miolen's question last night. If you think about the two arrows, the first arrow, we get shot by the poison arrow, and the surgeon comes to take it out. So that's pain. So we'll distinguish that as like pain and pleasure, low level. The surgeon comes to take it out, and we stop and we say, well, who shot the arrow? What kind of shaft is it made out of? Is it banyan or bamboo? What is the feather made out of? Is it a turkey vulture or whatever? And the surgeon was going like, no, I should really take the arrow out. So in the Buddhist scheme, there's pain, and then there's the second arrow, which is try to figure out what the arrow is all about. Wow, you should just take care of the arrow. That's suffering. So there is a lot of pain in the world. I don't know that we can help other people with suffering, which is like the mental part. But the pain part, I think we can definitely, that's what the precepts are about. That's what ethics, that's what compassion are about. That's what being involved in. So we can try to eliminate pain. We can try to eliminate hunger. We can band together, try and stop war. There's still going to be suffering, old age, sickness, and death, although people are working on the last one. Well, they're actually working on all of them. But I can't control how people perceive me or react, but I can also try not to kick them. And so I don't have to give a talk next month. We'll just take this section out. Does that help, I think?
Well, not really, but
Okay. Well,
I'm not necessarily expecting
yeah.
an answer. I'm just, you know,
Are you
Saying-
asking,
saying what's in my mind. It's
Yeah.
like,
are you asking the question in the sense that for Zen people, what's the imperative, or for all
well, I'm
humans?
asking broader than
All
that, because I mean,
humans?
it's like, you know, I think, this is, how do you get beyond this? Because that's what I see a lot of.
But that's just the practice. So it's like training wheels. You're supposed to use the effect. So if you want to be just strip it completely down, maybe take all the robes off. Misujima Roshi just says that Zazen quiets the autonomic nervous system, which is correct. So it relieves cortisol, lowers cortisol levels. It does things to the default mode network. Research is very preliminary on that, and it increases, it upregulates the neofrontal cortex, executive functioning, instead of the amygdala, which is fight or flight. So that is a practice. Now, so I have always had a problem with the idea that the ideal life would be to sit and stare at a wall until you were 80 and fell over. So that I always had. Yeah, everybody did that. There would be a little. I mean, it would be a nice world because everyone would be sitting at the wall, staring at the wall. But yeah, no, it's training wheels. I mean, so Dokai actually talked about this yesterday from Harada Roshi's teaching, where there's stillness. And then there's movement, and Zazen in movement is, Dogen says, productive work has never been anything else than almsgiving. So going out, being in the world, earning a living, being a bookkeeper is practice too. But I mean, the point, and this is, and you're right, from the Buddhist time, we can overstate for the time the idea, there's reincarnation, the idea is to get out of here, the world is a dumpster fire, and that's in the Pali Canon too. Like you can find sutra, there is a sutra that basically is the world is on fire. And that's there, but I think we don't have to keep that part. And I think we lost I think Zen sort of trimmed out a bunch of that because of the influences of Taoism, where you do have to be involved, and the rest of it is your life and your loved ones, and that's the reason for it. I don't think, I always, kids these days, they want their 15 minutes of fame, and they want to be, a rap star, a basketball star, or whatever. Nobody wants to be a nurse or whatever. I think you can have a very good life being an accountant and having a spouse or not of the whatever you want, and having kids and retiring and whatever. I think this, just as a practice, can reduce the suffering that will be innately involved in being a human being.
No.
No, yeah. Use religion. And
Can I say something before
Yes,
you do?
please.
Okay.
So, Wayne, I think you're saying, how do we reduce the suffering of the world if we're busy sitting on a mat, just paying attention to our own suffering or studying it?
And so okay, so what I said, okay,
I call the question.
Actually, I'm going to stop here for just a second. And so what I said is, I cannot stop your suffering. I cannot. There is no possible way I can stop your suffering. No, wait. But I might be able to lessen your pain. Your suffering is entirely up to you. I cannot change your mind. I cannot make puddles in your mind stream. I can't change your suffering. but we can lessen each other's pain. And that's the distinction I'm making. I can't control your mind.
So I think that's an excellent point. But the way I personally start is, well, what's the most effective thing I can do, and where do I have the strongest ability to do it? Me. If I work with my pain, which is essentially the Buddha's program, please get to know pain and its nature and how it works personally, deeply, thoroughly. That makes it more probable that when I aim to reduce somebody else's pain, that I'll see it more clearly. The story of Kiso Gotami, who was a young woman that had a child that died, and she was in deep pain. She was grieving deeply. She went all over her village looking for the answer, and somebody sent her to the Buddha. And she said, I hear that maybe you can help me. And he said, and so she said, can you help me? And he said, yes. And to help you, I need you to go to the households in the town one by one and bring me a mustard seed from a household that has never had anybody die. So she did. And from what we understand, she didn't come back and say, oh, thank goodness, I no longer feel no pain. What she came back and said was, oh, I see that every household has death. So changing that perspective is a lot of what the Buddha found we needed to do. And it doesn't mean we can't operate in traditional ways to relieve pain, but our ability to do that can also create pain for us. I'm trying to get rid of pain. I'm trying to get rid of death. Well, the best we can do at that point is say, I wish you good luck. Yeah.
I guess, I mean, just to be clear more about what, I mean, I think that was, you're right, it's about suffering, you know, beyond ourselves, but also it's like maybe you don't, maybe, yeah, I'm asking to you or a Buddhist practitioner, how is it that you're going to deal with people that aren't practicing in that way? You know, like aren't maybe don't even accept the premise of, you know,
Well,
you know.
Oh, okay. So yeah, so you just meet them where they, you know, you meet them where they are. I mean, my spouse is not a Buddhist. And he's actually very
How's that
anti.
going?
Well, he showed up last night, so that was a start. He came here for my ordination. He had a very bad experience with Christianity. His mother joined a cult, and I guess it just it ultimately comes back to my answer to Fukutoka's question last night, which is, we're not alone. You're not alone. And everyone, however it is, everyone has, the human condition is universal for humans. And regardless of how we're trying to deal with it, it's the same thing, whether you've decided it's God and it's God's, will of what's going on or not, and you don't believe in that either. So nobody asked me the question I thought they were going to ask me, and I already had an answer. No, it was Joan. So Joan said when she was here the second week, I was asked the same question. And she wasn't here to ask the question. And it was, what's the most important thing? And it's like, to be kind. Which is hard to do, because we're all just thrashing around in our stuff, and we can't even agree a lot of time on what the problem is. So, I'm not going to say that we have a monopoly on the answers, and when you're just working with non-Buddhists, you just meet them where they are and you try to find common ground, because we all ultimately always have common ground, because we're the same stuff. Yeah, we're 1 minute at over. Quick?
Well, my spouse isn't a Buddhist either. But so, Katagiri Roshi once said, beyond Buddhism, what's most important to me is how to live as a human being in this world. And I think an example I wanted to say is, if you have a boat that is sinking, and there's one person on the boat who is calm and balanced and equanimous, that person can really set the tone for the whole boatload of people who might be freaking out because the boat is sinking. And that one person, we use our Buddhist practice, but it doesn't have to be Buddhist practice, but that one person can make a whole lot of difference in whether the whole boatload of people drowns or can calmly take care of what needs to be done to safely survive a sinking boat, or perhaps if people can't be saved, to not be totally freaked out. And one person can make a difference. And that's what I think our practice is when we get off the cushion, is we can't take care of somebody else's suffering, but we can kind of try to point people in a direction that's more responsive and less reactive. And I think that's part of what our practice is.
Okay, one quick one.
I was just gonna say,
Oh.
to be that person is more important than pointing it out. Just model that, that's all. And I hope you got it all.
Nope, we're not done.
Great question.
So I think
Yes, thank you for the question.
Yeah.
it's a great question, and my answer is I volunteer a lot. I volunteer because people are hungry, and if people are hungry, not a lot of other stuff is going to get done. There's a lot of developmental things that happen. 200,000 children in Minnesota have food insecurity. They don't know where their next meal is coming from. So I've structured my life to do practical work to help the hunger issue. But because when we're working there, some people say, this is mindless work. I say, oh, wait a minute. This is not mindless work. This is the most mindful work I can possibly be doing. Because even if we're making conversation to make everybody comfortable with each other, at some point in these 2-hour shifts, there's a period of time, about 20 minutes, where everybody is just doing the work. It's a very rewarding thing, very beautiful. And especially chopping vegetables, because you have to be careful. One woman has a little chainmail glove so that she doesn't cut herself. But I take it as very seriously, may all beings be equally nourished. I mean, what is that about? That's telling us to go out in the world. Ham jur, over and over again, blah, blah, blah. Go out in the world, do something, help. So that's
I'd like to react to that.
Respond or react?
Yeah, react is a bad word.
He wants to talk. You talk.
So I know what you do, yeah, and I actually really admire that. And I think when you were talking about, you know, react with kindness. Okay, so to me, that's not necessarily, I mean, if it's casual, right? If it's just like,
It's not.
well, it could be. I mean, it's like the way, if you're like totally focused on your Zen interior, it could be, the kindness could be very casual, right? In the broader world. But I mean, I think I would say that maybe being engaged is probably an even, you know, higher, I mean, that would, to me, represent a better engagement. I mean, better
Yeah, sure,
take on that.
sure. All right. That's a sesshin, I think. Oh, no, we have closing circle.
Can I make a Dokai?
Yeah, oh, Dokai. You need Mike.
Make sure it's not muted.
Okay, can you hear me? Oh, hear me okay? Okay. I think the folks at home can tell we're in session because we're breaking the rules. Anyway, we'll close very soon. But this is a tiny little example of which doesn't compare to Rushin's. But I was getting some groceries one day, walking to my car. It was a cloudy, kind of chilly day. And there was another person right beside me. And he kind of said, in kind of a sarcastic way, he said, "Nice day, right?" You know, something like, "Oh, what a wonderful day." And I said, "Yeah, could be worse." Something like. And he said, "Yeah." He started laughing. "Oh, you're right about that." Something like that. But it's just, and I wasn't thinking, "Oh, okay, I got to practice some Zen here." It's just like, this is a stranger I've never seen before. And you're just responding. And he started laughing and he said, "Hey, you have a great day." I said, "You have a good day too." It's just like that. So you're just engaged, not any thinking about Buddhism or Zen or anything. It just comes out in kind of a way like, "I'll just be quiet," something like, you know, saying something that maybe is not kind or not engaged. So anyway, I think that's, and we encounter, most of the people we encounter are not Buddhists. This is a
That would be an understatement.
So,
Unless you sit in a monastery.
well, unless you're here.
Unless you're here.
Now there's only, one of us who aren't Buddhists. So that's okay. Anyway, I'm going to leave it to our speaker to close this down. Thank you.
All right, thank you, everyone. And I'm actually now going to turn it over to Alex for the festivities.
We'll do some announcements. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for a riveting discussion. Thank you for a riveting practice period and session. Thank you for being here. So coming up, we have coming up March. So I'm told it'll be my first March, but this turns into a soupy wonderland instead of a winter wonderland, which I think we're getting some snow next week, so that'll add to the soup. Anyway, we'll close down a little bit in March, but in April we have a work weekend coming up on the 14th. After that, we have a healing retreat. In May, we have a Caring for the Land weekend, along with a fan favorite Just Sitting retreat. And then in June, we have a women's retreat and the Loring group. Those coming up, so check that out all on our social medias. Give us a like and comment if you would like to do so. Our calendar is on the website. You can find all of the events there and sign up, register, all that good stuff. We have a link posted in the chat if you would like to donate. We are completely supported by your donation, so thank you very much for any type of support. And we are very appreciative of that. So I believe we will close with the 4 vows.
Could you just mention who's speaking next week?
Next week,
I believe it's Ado Phoebe.
Ado Phoebe
With us.
Reinhardt will be speaking, and she is on the bottom right of our Zoom screen. Thank you.
The Zoom Squares.
The Zoom Hollywood Squares.
I like Zoom though.
Beings are numberless, I vow to free them. Delusions are inexhaustible, I vow to end them. Dharma gates are boundless, I vow to enter them. The Buddha way is unsurpassable, I vow to realize it.
Come on down.
Thanks, everyone.